Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I would like to contest the fundamental premise that we've heard from the previous speaker, that this is a matter that needs to be urgently rushed through the Parliament because we've just recently had a case come down which has created a great deal of uncertainty, and therefore we need to act with great haste here. And act in haste in such a way that's quite extraordinary. We're proposing a major change to a superannuation scheme without any consultation with the industry or with the unions and the affected employees. Now, we're told this is because this case has come up, the Alcott case that came up and a decision was made in December and revealed this problem. This problem, which as the government has analysed it, extends the coverage, or says that employees shipping that is engaged substantially in interstate trade is also covered by the current Seafarers, the current Sea Care scheme. Now, I think it is important for us to understand that the government has had plenty of notice that this is an issue, because back in May 2014 there was a decision in the Administrative Appeals Tribunal, a decision that basically found very much what has in fact been reconfirmed in the federal court. So the government had noted more than 6 months ago that there was this question of interpretation of this piece of legislation. It had ample time to take action to ensure that it brought all parties together, that it brought the government together with the shipping industry and with the affected unions, and worked out a consensus approach. But they didn't do that. They sat on their hands for the intervening 7 months that this was before the federal court, and took no action. And I think that is not just a case of complacency, but I do think it goes to the very a problem that we see really deeply entrenched in this government in many areas of endeavour, and that is an absolute loathing of the tripartite process. And I think I've spoken here before in this House about many economists that have analysed one of the reasons why economies like Germany have done much better than one would have expected in the circumstances, and that this is substantially attributed that across whether or not there's a conservative or progressive government in place in Germany, that there is a commitment to these tripartite structures, and that has enabled Germany to respond with much greater flexibility to a whole variety of economic challenges that it has faced. But what we have here is under the leadership of our Prime Minister is an intellectually very primitive government that is motivated primarily by an anti-union ideology that is just simply unable to do that grown-up thing of bringing all parts of industry together to work through a process. And from my experience of dealing with maritime unions, that indeed if you adopt that approach, if you bring them into a platform where there's industry and the players, that you can achieve progress. So what we have, so first of all, I think that this case that has been made by the government, that this is a matter of urgency that needs to be dealt with now, is disingenuous, because they have had a good 7 months' notice prior to the full court of the federal court's decision that this was an issue in play. And indeed, there is even given that they had done nothing, there is no reason now why we can't take that approach, get all the players in together, negotiate some outcomes here. Now, the government claims, and a point that was made by the government's lead speaker on this matter, is that that we still have uncertainty. I mean, the defining provision is whether or not a shipping route, a ship is engaged directly and substantially in interstate or international shipping becomes the defining point at which a vessel comes under the Seafarers Act. Now, that is itself not going to be very clear, and certainly in the West Australian case, where we have traditionally had until, and no doubt once again when we have Labor governments back in, we will have coastal shipping routes, which yes, right. When we had enlightened governments that in Western Australia that recognised the importance of this for regional WA, but a traditional coastal shipping company, a service running through the coastal ports of WA, would often go into the Northern Territory. Now, you might say that is something that is, so you could argue that is directly engaged in interstate, even though it is a territory, interstate trade, but is it substantially engaged in interstate trade? If, for example, 5 of the ports that it goes to a West Australian port, and it goes onto a port in the Northern Territory, it might cross the directly, but does it cross the threshold for substantially? So suggesting that this rushed bill with this directly or substantially is actually going to provide the clarity is, of course, certainly not a no-brainer. I think there is still real uncertainty. Now, and there's also got to be some logic about, is this a good system? I mean, we actually have the government coming in here very often talking about the need for national consistency, the need for there to be a clear pathway. If we look at many of the activities, say, for example, many of the coastal shipping activities in Western Australia, they are involved in the offshore oil and gas industry, both at the exploration and at the in the actual offshore oil and gas production. So we have, of course, vessels that rig tenders that service both the exploration and the drilling rigs, the seismic vessels, and the exploration vessels. And of course, when FLNG commences, there will be vessels going and servicing those. Now, and it's a very interesting delineation, because we know, for example, if we took the Tarosa field in the Browse Basin, that was considered up until and I think passing through this Parliament a few months ago, that was considered to be out of state waters, that was indeed in Commonwealth waters. So it would have been covered by the Seafarers Act. But, due to some detailed surveying of the land, we found what have been mislabelled the Golden Rocks. These Golden Rocks, which meant that the Tarosa lease, retention lease, actually turns out to be substantially in WA coastal waters, and these are a series of rocks no bigger than a large table that have changed the boundary of where the boundary of the Commonwealth and state waters. So suddenly, so you might be having this vessel, if it was going out to deal with the retention, the Browse Basin, doing exploration in the Browse Basin. One day it would have been considered to be in Commonwealth waters, and now it is considered to be in WA waters. So suddenly, if this Act passes, that we find that the sets of circumstances that regulate the long-term welfare and compensation entitlements of the respective seafarers will change. Now, that just seems to me to be quite implausible. So you might have, for example, someone taking the ship out to the Prelude, doing exactly the same work, taking a vessel out from, say, Broome out to the Prelude lease, and they will be on one set of formulation. The same person, if the next time round they are rostered on a vessel that is going out to that part of the Browse Basin, the Chirosa lease, for example, they will have a very different compensation regime. Now, that doesn't seem to be very sensible to me, and it doesn't seem to be in keeping with the sort of logic that we often argue that we need to have a consistent set of workplace practices and workplace arrangements across similar provisions. So there are, and as I say, an increasing amount of the coastal shipping in WA is servicing the offshore oil and gas industry, and this is going to create, I think, a really quite bizarre situation of the same people, depending on what ship they are rostered on for a particular time slot, having very, very different workers' compensation entitlements. So there is no case for this bill to be rushed through. It is important to ensure that we have got some certainty and some clarity, but this is something that needs to be properly worked out through a tripartite process, taking into account all of this myriad range of factors, not something that is rushed through because of an ideological inability for this government to participate in tripartite